You're listening to the Travis Makes Money podcast. What is going on, money makers? Welcome back to the Travis Makes Money podcast, where it's our mission to help you make more money. Today on the show, we're going to be talking a little bit about marketing agencies with my new friend, Brien Gearin. Brien is the host of the Millionaire University Podcast and owns Ricochet Digital Marketing, a company that supports the growth of home service providers. These two companies alone are generating a combined $82,000 a month and growing, based on what Brien and I talked about before we hit the record button. So I'm stoked to talk a little bit about these things because, as always, this is one of my favorite ways to do this thing because his company that's generating good money now started as a side hustle, which tells us like literally anybody can do this. You just got to figure out a path. And that's what Brien did. So stoked to jump into this conversation. But before we do that, if you're wondering how I go about building relationships with the amazing people on this show or on my other show, Travis Makes Friends, it's through the podcast. It's the Trojan horse for me. It's allowed me to connect with people I never, ever thought would give me the time of day. But that's just one thing a good podcast does. If you're doing it well, it also helps you create better social content, grow your personal brand, sharpen your expertise, and then eventually could even pay you sponsorship dollars to do all of those things. So if you're curious about starting a podcast for your business and you're already running a 7, 8, 9 figure business, then head over to travischappell.com/coaching. There's a quick application right there. We'll see if maybe we'd be a good fit to work together on a one-on-one basis to get your podcast out into the world or to improve your existing show to be able to take on sponsors and things like that. travischappell.com/coaching. Brien Gearin, thank you so much for joining me, my man.
Yeah, Travis, man, it's a pleasure to be here. I'm excited. I think we're going to be talking about everything that's right up my alley, from starting a side hustle to being a full-blown company to being a podcast host. The fact you mentioned you get to meet so many cool people through being a host, I feel the same way, man. I've expanded my relationship network so much just by being a host of a pretty big podcast. So I'm right there with you, bud. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, dude, I kind of accidented my way into it, kind of, if you know what I mean. Like so the show's called Travis Makes Money Now, but the first iteration of the podcast was called Build Your Network. So it was quite literally like a networking for entrepreneurs, super niche type of a show. And because of that, like you start getting interviewed on other podcasts or whatever, when you become a podcaster, you just kind of get more into the circuit. And people started asking me like, hey, what's your number one networking tip or whatever, and I found myself at first just kind of coming up with these, high level philosophical things, like give and don't expect anything in return and learn how to add value and whatever. And it's like, while all of those things are true, it just kind of dawned on me one day that actually my best piece of advice now at this point for like building a good network is starting a podcast. When I actually examined the relationships that I had, I was like, they're almost all in some way directly related to an activity that was done on the show. I don't know if seems like you've kind of experienced the same exact thing.
Oh yeah, absolutely, man. Just from the connections I've been able to make, I've also just in my business as well, people who have found me through hosting the podcast. I've been able to turn new business from that, as well as the people who I've started these relationships with. A few of them we've done a little bit of work with, but even more so, it's the connections that they've brought to the table as well, where it's like, hey, I interviewed so-and-so on the podcast. We had a great time. We stayed in contact, multiple times over the ensuing months. And then they introduced me to 2 or 3 people that are really close to them in their network. And then I'm friendly with those folks. And then we get along, we build a relationship. And then they introduce me to 3 more people in their network. And it keeps like growing like tentacles. And I've been networking. That's how I started my business, was just going to Chamber of Commerce, getting out in front of people and just telling them what I do and who I am and listening to them and hearing their issues. And if they pertain to marketing, I had solutions. So it was like the podcast is like that on steroids, because now the folks that I get to be connected with, like you, Travis, uber connected with other people who are incredible, who I would never have thought or would have never had the opportunity to meet without having that podcast. So I'm right there with you.
Which came first, your podcast or your business?
Business came first. So Ricochet Digital was born just about 8 years ago as a side hustle to I was one of those guys that grew up, it was, you were told you're going to high school, then you're going to college, and then you're going to go get a job, right? Go be a good little worker soldier, right? And little did I know, growing up, I was an entrepreneur. I had a lawn care business. I was mowing neighbors' lawns and making a couple grand a summer. Really? Yeah, there you go.
We're finding more and more in common as we go along here. Yeah, that was my first kind of like business, was high school, mowing lawns, putting in lawns, laying sod. Working with
Yeah.
manure. Yeah, all that good stuff.
Yep. Oh, and I loved it, man. But then I thought, oh, this is just cool. This is just what I do because I do this in the morning and I play baseball at night. Like that was my thing. Dream life through high school, right? And then did so through college. And I got to the real world and I was like, holy crap, this sucks. Like I'm just supposed to sit in this cubicle, get yelled at by the sales manager and suck at my job and then go home really unhappy. Okay, I'm not doing this for the next
40
30 to
years. Yeah,
60 years,
right.
right? Like, hell no, not doing that. But then I put the pieces together. I'm like, you know what? I used to just go make my own money, ride the mower, do the edge, like, and do a great job, and people loved what I did for them. There's got to be a way to get back into that. So my last real job, I was actually working for my father-in-law in a small business. He had a warehouse safety products business, and he had started working with me just to help with marketing and sales, of which I only knew a little bit when it comes to sales. And then with marketing, I was like, this is interesting. There's something here.
Hmm.
I don't know what, but I did a deep dive on the internet, right? Like went down YouTube rabbit holes. I was getting real into personal finance at the time. So I was following a personal finance blogger, and he had sent out an email that said, hey, another one of my finance blogger friends, he's starting a course teaching people how to run Facebook ads as a side hustle. So you go help local businesses make an extra 1 or 2K a month. I'm like, sweet. I had just finished an online course where we took part in learning everything from Google ads, Facebook ads, email, HTML, all this stuff. And one section I did really well in, you got to run ads for this company in the real world. And out of 5,000 online students, my ads finished in the top 5 in terms of leads that had come in.
Wow.
So I was like, there's something there. And then like this ends 2 weeks later, I get this email and I'm like, there's something here. I don't know what, I don't know how to be an entrepreneur. I'm clueless. Like, what do I do? Get this email, see this course. It was like $300 and it came with a $50 a month coaching community. So I was like, you know what? This is it. I'm jumping in. I'm burning the boats. There's no looking back. My wife and I just found out she was pregnant with our first daughter. We had
Ooh.
just got a new house. I was like, I'm doing it. So from that point on, I started growing this on the side for about almost 2 years. I learned everything from these mentors in this course on, I finally had a technical skill,
Hmm.
which I felt like other than running a lawnmower, I had none of. I had interpersonal skills. I can talk all day long, but I couldn't do something technical.
Yeah.
And I finally got that skill. And then, long story short, I branched out into a full service marketing agency. And here we are. I don't even know what your original question was, but I went on a tangent there. But
No, that was perfect. I was talking about which came first, the podcast or the business, but it was kind of my
yeah.
sneaky way of asking you how you started the business, which is exactly what you gave me. So thank you.
Oh, perfect. I've been around the block.
Yeah.
But yeah, so business came first. Millionaire University, the podcast. So this came around through having me been a guest on. So you'll like this, Travis. So my mentors who originally taught me everything about starting an agency, they asked if I would go hop on a podcast, and it's to talk about me and my business and my story, but also to do a plug for their upcoming. They were reopening the doors to their community that I had originally been a part of.
Got
I
it.
said, sure, yeah, I'll do it. I had never been on a podcast. Turns out it was Nick Loper's Side Hustle Nation podcast.
Oh, yeah.
And so I hopped on there with him. We had a great discussion, talked about how I, had a side hustle doing marketing, all that jazz. And from this podcast, I had 3 major opportunities that came my way from people who heard me on that show. One of whom, 3 years later or 2 years later, was Justin Williams, who's the original founder of Millionaire University.
Hmm.
He heard me on there. He invited me on to his new show, the Millionaire University Podcast, asked if I'd talk about opening and starting a digital marketing agency. I said, sure, why not? That'd be awesome. So I went on, had a great show. He and I stayed in contact for 2 or 3 months afterwards. We started having more in-depth conversations, talking business, talking marketing, talking about Millionaire University and he and his wife's vision for that company. So, you know what? We need some help with the marketing. This is your jam, obviously. Would you be interested in coming aboard and working with us? We'll pay you. And also I want you to earn equity with us and be a partner in this business. And I was like, sure. Where do I sign?
Yeah.
And then he said, also, would you want to host the podcast with me? So I was like, yeah, why not? I've never done it, but let's give it a shot.
That's
So
fantastic.
yes, so Millionaire University came about just over about a year and a half ago, almost 2 years ago. And what a cool opportunity. I'm so blessed to have met Justin and Tara.
Yeah, no kidding, man. That's a great story too. And it allowed you to kind of pursue multiple things without having to take the full risk of doing multiple things at one time too.
Correct.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I had done that before. I had a year before that, I had gone into business in a similar vertical with marketing in fintech in the automotive space. And it turned out to not be the right opportunity, but I went shiny object syndrome, as many of us entrepreneurs do. And I essentially lost an entire year of focusing on Ricochet, my marketing business, focusing on this different agency.
Hmm.
Well, for a multitude of reasons, it really didn't pan out, didn't work out. But I learned a lot about partnership. I learned a lot about keeping your eye on the ball. So then, when this Millionaire University opportunity came around, I had a much deeper base of being able to assess what this opportunity is. Because I've had
Sure.
a lot of people who have come to me and said, "Hey, do you want to do this? You should start that. We should go do this." And I used to like be open to all of it, but now
Totally.
I'm very narrow focus on that. And looking at MU and having been, become a friend with Justin, I realized this wasn't one of those shiny objects, that it could also serve as maybe serve as a tool towards my own personal growth, to me having an effect at a place that's much bigger than me.
Yeah.
But then also there's the collateral where people hear you and they want to work with you, or they want to be in a relationship. They want to have a business relationship with you. So it's kind of all how it came full circle.
Yeah. What's so interesting, man, is that people have this concept, that this idea that you have to have a massive show in order for that to happen. And it's the furthest thing from the truth.
So far,
It's like,
correct.
because you're speaking on a podcast, like it puts this perceived barrier between yourself and the audience. And even if the audience is only a dozen or 2 dozen people, which for a lot of shows it is, like those people still love the show just like they would love Joe Rogan or any number of
Hmm.
massive podcasts that they might be listening to. But in their podcast app, there's no difference. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Like your show pops up right next to Diary of a CEO or whatever the massive show is
Right.
that we're all thinking is like, well, that's the pinnacle of success in podcasting. It's like, yeah, but you don't have to be that pinnacle of success in order to be able to gain a ton of the same benefits that they're getting. It might be on a smaller scale, but doesn't mean that it's not worth your time.
Oh yeah. It's the same effect as if you are the speaker on the stage, right? If you're the
Mm-hmm.
keynote, or if you're doing a presentation at a local chamber, or if you're the keynote of marketing world, or whatever those giant events are, it's the same mental mindset of that guy or gal is on the stage. They are the authority.
Mm-hmm.
They must know what they're talking about, or else they would not be standing there, right? So
Absolutely.
it's the same thing, the same mindset with a podcast. If they're the ones with the microphone and the headset and they get to talk and express their expertise, like you're just automatically one step ahead. So yeah, man, having a podcast whether you have 12 listeners or 12 million, it's incredible.
So tell me about your philosophy when it comes to managing your personal life as well. You mentioned that when you were first launching into this thing full time, or when you were first really attacking it as a side hustle, that your wife was pregnant with your first. So how many
Hmm.
kids do you have? And I guess bust that myth for me that you can't do that. Like this would have been nice if I had just done this before I had kids, but I got kids now. There's just no way I can do this.
Yeah. No, so we have four kids now, all under the age of 7. Our newest is going on 5 months old. So, yeah, so it's a little crazy, and we need a bigger house. So that's kind of the big thing that I've been working on the last few years, is growing the nest egg and growing my business. Because my wife, God bless her, she puts up with my entrepreneurial ways, but she's the steady income, right? She works at the VA hospital. She's a dietitian supervisor down there. I'm on her insurance, like very like, honey, I love you.
Yeah.
Um, but that being said, the onus is on me to grow my wealth, our wealth, through my business, because there's a certain amount of money she's going to earn, and there's
Yeah.
only one bonus a year, right?
It's
Like
capped.
that,
Right.
her money is what it is. It's capped. For me, it's completely uncapped. I can take this thing as far as I want, as big as I want. Now, do I wish when I was 22 I had the knowledge and wherewithal to find the people that I have now, or even at 50% of it? Absolutely. Because, the best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago. The second best time is today.
Mm-hmm.
Well, so we got married at 24. We had kids by 20, almost 28. And there wasn't a lot of time, but that could have been 4 years. I could have been building something. And I was busy floating around job to job, hating everything instead of just thinking forward, right? But it's one of those where my wife and I, we weren't going to not have kids just because we weren't quote unquote ready.
Yeah. Yeah.
We were always ready to be parents. We knew that. We knew we weren't going to be married very long before we started trying to have kids. And first of all, absolute biggest blessing is in life is having children. I hope everybody is fortunate enough to have as many children as they want. But when it comes to owning a business, and especially running it from home, when a lot of times there's either children at home or, daycare's, the sitter's sick or what, like, I know Travis, you said today's President's Day when we're recording, you got your two kids home. I've got my wife and one of my kids is home today.
Yep.
So you just piece it together. And sometimes I'll sit there and think, man, if I'd had started this before having kids, where could I be today?
Mhm.
But I can't think that way because it's part of my journey of starting this business at about the same time we started having kids, because that was the impetus on me was we're about to have a child. We just got a mortgage. I'm making some money at this job, nowhere near, there's no career future here. If I'm going to give the life that I want my family to have, I have to go out on my own and I have to go uncap my salary. So really having our first pregnancy was the kind of the big driving force for me. And like, it's now or never. And you know what? It's going to be tough having kids and trying to grow this thing and do all the things, but screw it. We're only here once. Why not try and do everything I can possibly do in this one lifetime? It'll be sticky. It'll be crazy. There's gonna be times where there's times I'm working on being a better father because I've got everything I need to do for my clients, everything I need to do for the podcast, and I've got all my kids, right? And our oldest daughter is severely handicapped. She has a rare neurological disorder called Rett syndrome. So there's an entire other layer to the onion that we have to be able to take care of.
Yeah. And your wife works.
And my wife works full time.
Right.
Yeah. And she used to be home 2 days a week, working from home after COVID. And then the government just reinstated, everybody goes back to work. Where unfortunately at her hospital, it's so small, they don't have anywhere to put her. So they're going to have to figure that out. But now it's going to be 5 days a week where I'm getting all the kids out in the morning, all four of them, getting everybody to and from daycare. And like my time is limited between about 9:30 and 3 o'clock when my oldest daughter's bus gets here. I've got a lot I've got to get done in this window. So it's high stress, it's high pressure, but for me, it's the only way I could survive. If I were at a 9 to 5 reporting to some other adult, it wouldn't work. It just wouldn't work. So it's crazy, man. And people ask me, like, how do you do that? That's insane. I'm like, I don't know. I just do it. Like the task is at hand and I just do my best to take care of it. And sometimes it doesn't get done very well. Probably oftentimes, with everything going on, it might not get done to the way I want it. But one of my original mentors, one of his big lines was done is better than perfect.
Yeah.
And I think I live by that because, it goes a long way in business, but it also goes a long way with family too, where, your kids see you're parenting your kids and they'll eventually understand that you're not perfect.
Right.
But you're always striving to be the best you can be. So,
yeah, dude. And one thing I found being a parent and an entrepreneur is that when you introduce new constraints, it forces you to learn to innovate to a certain degree, right? Like maybe if you didn't have kids, maybe you wouldn't have made that hire that you really needed to make. But since you had the free time to be able to handle that additional, whatever it is, client work or that additional ad account or that additional training thing or that additional, fill in the blank, because you would have had time to be able to do it. You might have just been like, I'll just do it, instead of thinking like a business owner where you're like, look, I have literally physical constraints here. If my wife wants to keep working like she does, and we want to maintain really great benefits through her job, because that's a nightmare being an entrepreneur. It's like getting your own benefits and paying for them and everything. If we want to have these positives of her doing this thing, then that means I got to get the kids to daycare. I got to get them to school. I have to pick up the slack here, which means I literally can't be doing client calls until this specific time every day. I can't just get up earlier and make it work or whatever. It's like, that whole thing that people talk about where like, oh, I beat the sun up and then I get more done before everybody else wakes up. And it's like, yeah, but I tried that a few times and my kids tend to just wake up whenever they want to wake up and then immediately destroy any potential productivity that's going on in my house during that time. So it's like, okay, so that particular option isn't an option anymore, but there's another option somewhere, and so if your time is by definition constrained, then you have to look at all the things that you're getting done or the things that you have to do and go like, I only have time to do those things. But it forces you to pick the most important things to be working on And then it forces you to have to outsource the things that you literally don't have time to work on that are less important tasks for you to get done, and actually can help improve and streamline the business and put yourself in a position to succeed better with less of your time being consumed by the business. So I've found some of those constraints to actually be extremely helpful rather than the opposite.
Yeah, I totally on board with you on that because it forces you to focus in ways you didn't think you could or in ways you never thought you would have to.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's like, if I know, my daughter gets home at 3, I've got this client thing that needs to happen at 2, I've got to be off by 2:45 because I'm not going to let the bus sit there and wait with her on there, right?
Right.
So, and then it helps me build into my SOPs. Like, this is the amount of time this project takes. It takes 32 minutes to onboard with our AI systems for the Google business profiles. I know that, okay, it takes this much, we have 4 onboards this week. Do I have time to do it? No. Okay. Now I delegate. Right.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And you're so right, man. Like it's forced me to do that multiple times over with with every kid we have that we're popping out. And I think it's been a net positive for my business. Has it maybe slowed growth a little bit? Maybe, I don't know,
Yeah.
but still a net positive. And business is booming now. So I think it's really coming to fruition.
But also, like you said, what's the trade-off? Like what's the alternative? The alternative is to what? Not have kids. So if you want to have kids, you're just supposed to never have them because you're an entrepreneur. Like that doesn't make any sense. Just like you have to just do it and then figure it out. Like there's been the thing I always look at, bro, is like, has somebody else done this? You know what I mean? And the answer is overwhelmingly yes. And that's also not to keep bringing up the podcast thing, but that's also one of the huge benefits from my show. And probably, and I'm not sure if you'd agree with this, I'd love to hear your thoughts. One of the benefits from my show is being able to have conversations with people like you, where I can have a conversation and they are telling me what they're doing. And I can look at that and go, oh, it's totally doable. It's totally possible. It's completely manageable. There's countless stories of people who are making this exact thing happen on a daily basis and to a crazy degree. You know what I mean? Like it's not just like, oh, it's just me and Brien talking about running a podcast and doing a couple businesses. It's like we had a guy on, I don't know, a year ago now. He's a friend of mine. He's the founder of Four Loko, the popular alcohol, caffeine drink back in the day.
I remember that from freshman year in college.
Yeah. And Four Loko is still around, by the way. They do a lot of their business outside of the States, but now they have a bunch of little like smaller beverage companies that are within their, like Mamitas, tequila mixers, things like that's a Four Loko company. It's still a multi-9-figure business. And then the same guy, Chris Hunter, who was the co-founder of that, left that company and then bought this teeny tiny little vegan protein company and scaled that from being in like 12 retail locations to being in like hundreds across the country. They're in Starbucks. It's called Koya. The brand is Drink Koya. And Koya protein is all over the place. And that's now also a multi-9-figure beverage brand that he started. And he's got kids, he's got a family, and he did this thing while he had kids, while he had a family. And I look at people like that and I'm like, look, if this dude can figure out how to get into one of the most competitive spaces in the entire world, which is beverage, with a competitive thing, which is protein beverage, and figure out how to piece that together and turn it into a 9-figure business with kids at home, like, what am I whining about when you know what I mean? Like it's totally completely doable. You just have to figure out what those challenges are and solve for those problems and put yourself in a position to succeed.
Exactly. And I don't know if asynchronous is the right word, but I started learning when I was working at different jobs. It applied differently across different jobs, but especially when I started working from home and doing my own thing, what I was doing could be totally asynchronous, meaning I could work for 90 minutes in the morning. And if I knew my daughter had a doctor's appointment, I can block out that hour. Good. I'm back. She's back in daycare. I eat some lunch. I come back. It's 12:45. Okay, now I've got another hour, 2 hours worth of things. Here's my checklist. I write them down. I do it. I get it done. And then I got to go do something else for an hour. Or it's the summertime and I got to get the lawn mowed before all the kids are home and it won't get done and it'll just be a hunk of junk, or the dishwasher, all of these things. And that's why the line of work I chose lends itself to this, because when we're in marketing, outside of biz dev, like it's staying on top of client relationships, making sure they're getting their ROI, maintaining, communication, and maintaining my people. And then after that, it's kind of maintenance mode where these are running, we're tracking them, we're making sure everything's fine, we're troubleshooting when necessary. But I can go do other things while these things are happening if I manage my time well.
Yeah.
And, I like the one kind of quote unquote corporate job I had. I was like, man, like half these people aren't really working. Like you're
Yeah.
you're you're
Right.
working in bits and spurts, and it's
Like
like,
they're here, but they're only putting in like 21 hours of like actual work time in a week.
right, right. And then for the guys who performed really well, they probably did a little bit more than that, but they still did really well in the amount of time that they were actually working.
Right.
And it's so when I started seeing it, I'm like, what are we stuck in this cubicle for from 8 to 5 with someone who won't let us leave until the bell rings? Like I
Hmm.
feel like a
Hmm.
child in school again. This is ridiculous. And
Right.
that's when I was out.
So tell me a little bit about personal lifestyle choices, Brien. So you mentioned that one of your big goals is to get a bigger house because now you got 4 kids and you're outgrowing the space that you're in. How do you look at every dollar that comes into your personal life? Where does that money go? Like, are you setting aside a certain amount for emergency savings versus saving for a house versus putting money into investments versus putting money back into the business? How do you manage that?
Yeah, so it's actually, especially in Q1 of this year, I'm working with my bookkeeper in exactly how to better pay myself even more, and how to divvy it out once I pay myself. We've been loosely on the housing market for a few years. Right after COVID, before the interest rates took a hike, we were losing bids left and right. Or we're in Cincinnati, Ohio, and for those who aren't from here, you might be surprised to hear it's a ridiculously challenging real estate market.
Yeah.
Um, and we were getting outbid by 100K, like, so we couldn't compete back then.
Dang.
So whatever, we get back on the market about a month 2 months ago, um, and in a much better position because my business kind of took off since that time, and we're in a much better position to buy. Market is still kind of crazy out here, but we went out with our agent and we found the perfect house, like checked 99.9% of our boxes. Thought we were going to get it. Must have got outbid from somebody who's got a whole heck of a lot more cash and didn't care about inspections, which still happens. Even at the price range we're looking at, we were kind of surprised that that happened, or that our offer, which we thought was incredibly competitive, didn't come through. But I was like, okay, here's what I'm going to do finance wise. We have our nest egg. There's a portion of that that's going to be going to the down payment, but I'm also sitting on, we've got about 200 grand in equity. Once I sell my house, it's probably going to be money that most of it gets rolled into the new one. So we're going to be able to put down way more than 20% on the new house, which will be great and still maintain the nest egg. But then I thought to myself, you know what? I'm really interested in where my money goes. I use profit first in my business. Have you heard of that?
Yep. Yep.
Okay.
Mike's been on the show. Yeah. A couple of years ago.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, fantastic. I love it. It's fantastic for my business. I'm starting to do that in my personal finances.
Same,
So I
actually.
was
Yeah.
like, yeah, I was like, honey, why have we not created just a high yield savings account at Ally? Just label it next mortgage, and then just start getting comfortable paying what roughly our next new mortgage will be. And it'll essentially just be a payment from my business to me. So that way I know on the first of the month, this account's getting stuffed with our approximate new mortgage.
Yeah.
And then whenever we get that house, now I'll have, hopefully north of $10,000 just sitting in this account ready to be tied to our new mortgage, or
Yeah.
10,000 plus, whatever it's going to be. And then we'll continue making those payments from the business to this account. And that's just the mortgage account. So now the regular, our OPEX, our operating expenses, personal checking account sticks to that. It doesn't include what'll be a pretty large chunk of change for the mortgage.
Yeah.
But yes, personal finance wise, I really dove into this back in 2016. I just started working remotely most of the week from home for my father-in-law. And I started going down the rabbit holes on personal finance because I realized, you know what, in high school, college, growing up, like I never learned squat about personal finance. I was still kind of like borderline, like wondering how credit works. Like that's where I was when I was
Right.
25 years old. And I was like, I'm gonna have to teach myself this first of all. And then I got really into it. I'm like, oh, sweet. So like I can pay myself this, I can put it here, I can let it grow in this type of account. I can, get a money market, or I can, man, these mutual funds, this looks interesting. Maybe I ought to
Yeah.
look into that. Like, the
Yeah.
market, holy
Like,
crap.
wait, I can
Like,
accumulate money tax free in a
yeah,
Roth. That's crazy. Like I can take
right.
money out. Yeah. That's wild.
Yeah, I can have a retirement account. Holy crap, man, I must be an adult. So that was one of the first things I did, was open a Roth just through my bank because I didn't know any better. And I started socking away a couple bucks a month in that. That's obviously since rolled over into different accounts I have now. And obviously being an entrepreneur, very tax advantageous for those curious about entrepreneurship and tax. Um, but when I started getting into that, it started really affecting our personal finances in a positive way because now I started using a budgeting app. I used Mint for a long time. Now I use Copilot.
Hmm.
Now I know where the money's going. And I was like, back then I was just shocked at like, why didn't anyone teach me this? Like, what's going on here? And like, I don't, not
Wild.
to place blame on others, but I'm like, where was this?
Yeah,
Why
no
was this
kidding.
not in my brain?
Yeah.
But yeah, man. So now I kind of run our house on profit first. We obviously cover all our expenses in the proper way, but we have a handful of different accounts where our savings go. And now I'm starting to map those out as to where those go. Like my next vehicle purchase, I've been riding the same car I bought in 2013 after I graduated and moved to Cleveland. It's a 2010 Ford Fusion. It's rusted out on the bottom. My wife only uses it to drive to work now. And we're going to ride it till it dies because I love not having a car payment.
Yeah.
But my goal is the next car, buy myself an F-150, and the goal is cash.
Hmm.
So I've just been populating this account every month with business money that I pay myself for my business. So that when I go to buy this truck, I've got hopefully 30 plus K in this account where I can just be like, cut the check. We're done. Not doing
Yep.
that financing stuff. Or if I need to finance, maybe it's 8 or 10K, right?
Love it,
So
man. This has been awesome. I appreciate you taking the time to walk us through the personal stuff as well as the business stuff. Super, super helpful. Where can people go to get more from Brien?
yeah, so if you want to hit me up personally, I'm most active on LinkedIn. So just look me up, BrienGearin. You can also check out my website, ricochettdm.com. That says D is in digital, M is in marketing. And then check us out at Millionaire University as well, millionaireuniversity.com, and the podcast as well. We love to, we talk to aspiring entrepreneurs every day. So it's a
Love
ton
it.
of fun.
Love it. Millionaire University, go check out if you're listening to this, whatever podcast app you're on, go check out Millionaire University. If you like this content, you will love everything they're putting out over there. Go check out some of the stuff that Brien's got going on. That's Brien, Gearin, Gearin, Brien Gearin. Go check out some of the stuff that Brien's putting out. If you enjoyed this conversation, Brien, thanks for taking the time. Everybody else listening, tuning in. Remember, money only solves your money problems. You're left with the problems that money can't solve, but it's a little bit easier to solve those problems with some money in the bank. So let's solve that one first here on the Travis Makes Money podcast. Thanks so much for tuning in. Catch you next time. Peace out.